38 years of building something together, and it ended the afternoon my son handed me a pen and smiled like he was doing me a favor. I should start from the beginning, I suppose. That's what my sister always says. Eleanor, you skip the middle and wonder why people can't follow you. She's right. I do that. My name is Eleanor. I'm 64 years old, and I live in a 2-story house on the outskirts of Guelph, Ontario. The same house my late husband and I bought the year our son was born. The maple in the front yard was a sapling then. Now it's taller than the roof. 38 years go by faster than anyone warns you. My husband Robert died 22 months ago. Heart attack. Sudden, clean, no warning. He was in the garage sorting fishing lures on a Tuesday afternoon, and by Wednesday morning I was identifying him at Grand River Hospital. I don't talk about that part very often. Even now, it sits in my chest like a stone that never quite dissolved. What I will say is this: Robert was meticulous. A retired civil engineer doesn't leave things to chance, and Robert left nothing to chance. In the weeks after he passed, when I sat with our lawyer downtown and started to understand the full picture of what he had arranged, the house, the rental property in Elora, the investment accounts, the TFSA, I realized my husband had been quietly protecting me for years, possibly without ever saying so directly. That was Robert. He showed love through spreadsheets and contingency plans. I did not tell my son about any of it. Not right away. And then time passed, and I still didn't tell him. And then he met her, and I was very glad I hadn't. My son. I'll call him my son throughout, because that's how I think of him now, as a role he's occupying, a version of himself I'm still trying to reconcile with the boy I raised. Met his girlfriend at a work conference in Calgary. She was in corporate consulting, sharp, polished, the kind of woman who makes a room feel slightly smaller, just by knowing exactly where she stands in it. I noticed it the first dinner we had together, at an Italian place on Stone Road. She ordered for him before he'd finished reading the menu. I thought, maybe that's just how young couples are now. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. They got engaged 8 months later. The wedding was in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Outdoor ceremony, late September. Genuinely beautiful. I sat in the front row and cried the way mothers are supposed to cry, and I meant every tear. I wanted to be wrong about her. I wanted the warmth I'd seen him show to rub off on their marriage, and for all of us to become one of those lucky families that actually like each other. For a little while, I let myself believe that's what was happening. She called me more often in the first months. Checked in, asked about the house, asked whether I needed anything. My sister thought she was lovely. Eleanor, not everyone is out to get you, she said. The one time I let slip that something felt off, I let it go. I told myself the unease was grief wearing a different coat. Then winter came. It started small, the way these things always do. My daughter-in-law? I'll call her my daughter-in-law, though the word sticks in my throat. Mentioned at Christmas dinner that the stairs in my house might be getting difficult. I'm 64. I walk 3 kilometers every morning along the Speed River Trail regardless of temperature. I do not find stairs difficult. But I smiled and said I was fine because it was Christmas and my son was passing the roast potatoes, and I didn't want to make it strange. In January, she forwarded me listings for condos. Senior friendly, she said. Low maintenance, Eleanor. You wouldn't have to worry about the yard. I forwarded them straight to my deleted folder and did not respond. February, she asked, very casually, over the phone, whether I had a financial advisor. I told her I did. She asked who. I said someone Robert had worked with for years, someone I trusted. She said she knew a firm in Toronto, very reputable, that specialized in estate planning for widows. I said I'd keep that in mind. I did not keep it in mind. March was when my son called, and his voice had that particular careful flatness it gets when he's been coached on what to say. He said he and his wife had been talking. He said they were worried. He said that managing a property on my own at my age, with everything I'd been through, and he paused there long enough for the grief to be pointed, was a lot. He said they just wanted to help. I asked him what kind of help he meant. He said his wife had spoken to a lawyer about something called a representation agreement, so that if anything happened to me, decisions about the property and my finances could be made quickly, without complications. He said it was very common in British Columbia, that there were similar instruments in Ontario. He said it was just a safeguard. I said I'd think about it. I got off the phone and sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The maple out front was just starting to bud. I watched it through the window, and I thought about Robert and about the way my daughter-in-law had been building something, slowly, brick by brick, since September. The condo listings, the financial advisor, the concern about stairs, and now this. I thought about the Elora property. Robert had purchased it 12 years ago, a small rental house near the gorge, the kind of property that looks unimpressive until you hear the annual rental income and see what similar lots have sold for in the last 5 years. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't something you'd know about unless I told you. And I had not told anyone except my lawyer and my accountant, both of whom I'd known for over a decade. I called my lawyer the next morning. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a suspicious woman by nature. I'm not someone who assumes the worst or holds grudges or keeps secrets out of spite. I kept quiet about Robert's estate because grief is private, and because I needed time to understand it myself, and because my mother once told me that a woman who broadcasts what she owns invites people to decide it belongs to them. I kept quiet for practical reasons, sensible reasons. But sitting at that table, watching the maple, I understood that my silence had been protecting me without my fully realizing it, and that now someone was patiently trying to find the door. I did not sign anything. Spring moved into summer. My daughter-in-law called less. I noticed the shift in temperature, the way warmth gets withdrawn strategically. My son visited twice, once for my birthday in May, once in July for a weekend, and both times felt stiff, transactional, like visits with an obligation attached. He didn't ask about the house directly, but I caught him looking at things. The bookshelves, the hallway closet, the small oil painting Robert had bought at an art fair in Prince Edward County. Nothing expensive, just something we loved. I kept living my life. I had lunch with my sister every other Thursday. I tended the garden. I drove to Elora once a month to check on the rental property and visit with my tenants, a retired couple from Kitchener, who'd been there 4 years and kept the place beautifully. I met with my accountant in June and updated my estate documents, not because anything had changed, but because being organized is its own form of peace. September came, a year since the wedding. My son called on a Tuesday evening and said he and his wife wanted to come for the weekend. I said of course. I made up the guest room, bought fresh coffee beans, planned a proper dinner. I told myself it was a visit, just a visit. They arrived on a Friday afternoon, and by Saturday morning I knew it wasn't just a visit. She had brought paperwork, not dramatically, not in an envelope labeled with anything alarming. She tucked it into the canvas bag she carries everywhere, the one with the Toronto consulting firm's logo on the side. But I saw it when she set the bag on the kitchen counter, corner of a document folder peeking out, and I recognized what was in her posture. A kind of forward lean, readiness. We had dinner that night, the 3 of us, and it was almost pleasant. She was warm in the way she becomes when she's decided something. My son talked about a project at work, something to do with municipal planning, and I listened and asked questions and poured the wine and thought, tomorrow she's going to ask me to sign something. I woke up at 5:30 Saturday morning and watched the light come up over the backyard. I thought about calling my sister. I didn't want to alarm her before anything had happened. I made coffee and sat with it, and did what Robert used to call running the numbers. Except I wasn't running numbers, I was running scenarios. If I said no, what would she do? What would my son do? How far had they actually thought this through? And then I thought, they don't know about Alora? Because here's what they were imagining, I think. They were imagining a 64-year-old widow sitting on a single asset, a residential property in Guelph with a reasonable but not spectacular market value. Someone whose resources were modest enough that a representation agreement would give meaningful leverage. They were imagining a woman who needed managing. They did not know about the Alora property. They did not know about the investment accounts. They did not know that 18 months ago, after several conversations with my lawyer, I had placed both properties and the bulk of the non-registered investments into a family trust, one that named my sister and my lawyer as co-trustees, with specific conditions that could not be altered unilaterally. They did not know that the house in Guelph, where we were currently sitting and eating my cooking and sleeping in my guest room, was the only thing they could see. And there is nothing in the house worth what they apparently thought there was. Saturday morning after breakfast, my daughter-in-law cleared the dishes with the efficiency of someone setting a stage and then sat down across from me at the kitchen table. My son stayed standing. He had his arms crossed in a way that I don't think he knew looked like what it looked like. She said she wanted to talk to me about something she'd been thinking about for a while. She said she hoped I'd hear her out with an open mind. She said the last 2 years had been hard on everyone, losing Robert, adjusting to a new chapter, and that she and my son had been discussing how to make sure I was properly supported going forward. Properly supported. I looked at her. I looked at my son. He was looking somewhere near the refrigerator. She said she'd spoken with a lawyer who specialized in elder law and family asset planning. She said it was increasingly common, especially for women living alone, to have a trusted family member hold power of attorney, not just for health care, but for property and finances. It was just practical, she said, the way insurance is practical. She said, the way insurance is practical. You hope you never need it. But, I said, does your lawyer know about the Alora property? The room went very quiet. She looked at my son. He looked at me. And I watched her work through the question, trying to assess whether I'd said it as an accusation or a genuine inquiry, whether it was a test or a slip or something else entirely. I watched her recalibrate in real time. I said Robert's estate included a rental property near Alora. He purchased it in 2012. I've had it for almost 2 years now. I'm sure your lawyer would want to know about it if we're talking about a comprehensive arrangement. And then I said very gently, although it's in a trust now, so I'm not certain how much of it would be relevant to what you're describing. She put her hand flat on the table. I said, I set up the trust 14 months ago. My lawyer and my sister are co-trustees. It was something Robert and I had discussed before he passed. He was very thorough about these things. The Guelph house is the only property still in my name directly. As you know. My son unfolded his arms. He looked at his wife. She was looking at the table. I poured myself more coffee. I asked if anyone else wanted some. Nobody answered right away. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car went by slowly on the street. My daughter-in-law picked up the canvas bag from the counter. She said she'd left something in the car. She went out through the front door. She was gone for a long time. My son sat down. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly that he hadn't known about the trust. I said I knew he hadn't. He asked when I was going to tell him. I said I hadn't decided and that I'd been waiting to see if there was a reason to. He was quiet after that. I don't know what was moving through him. I hope it was something uncomfortable. I hope it stayed uncomfortable long enough to matter. I told him I loved him. I meant it completely, without reservation, in the uncomplicated way you love someone you watched learn to walk. I told him I was not going to pretend the last year hadn't happened, but that I wasn't interested in punishing anyone. I told him I had no intention of dying anytime soon, and that when I did, what I had built with his father would go where Robert and I had decided it would go, according to documents we had both signed in the presence of a notary, and that it was already done. He nodded. He didn't look up. His wife came back inside about 20 minutes later. She had the paperwork in the canvas bag still, but the forward lean was gone. She was polite at lunch. She spoke carefully. She complimented the soup, which I had made from scratch with the last of the summer tomatoes, and I thanked her, because the soup was genuinely good, and some things you accept gracefully, regardless of the circumstances. They left Sunday afternoon. We stood in the driveway, and my son hugged me. A real hug, not the obligatory kind, and I held on for an extra second, because he is still my son and some things do not change. We talk on the phone now, every couple of weeks. It's different, more careful on both ends. Whether it grows back into something warmer, I don't know yet. I think that's up to him. My sister came for lunch the Thursday after they left. I told her everything over the tomato soup I'd frozen in portions because that's what you do when you make too much of something good. She sat across the kitchen table where my daughter-in-law had sat with her paperwork, and she listened without interrupting, which is the greatest gift a sibling can give you. When I finished, she said, "Robert would have loved this." I said I thought he would have too. That night, I walked my 3 kilometers along the Speed River in the early dark. The air finally cool after a long summer. The trail quiet except for the sound of water and someone's dog somewhere in the distance. I thought about the maple in the front yard and the little house near the gorge and the investment accounts sitting patiently where Robert put them, compounding while the world went about its business. 64 years old. I had never felt more like myself. There is a version of this story where I signed the papers, where I was tired or guilty or lonely enough to believe the warmth she turned on was real, where I handed someone else the key to what Robert spent a lifetime building, because a younger woman sat across a kitchen table and spoke in the calm, reasonable tones of someone who had decided they were helping. I did not sign the papers. And every morning when I walk out my front door and the maple is standing there, doing what maples do, I am grateful. Quietly, privately, in the way Robert taught me, that I kept my silence long enough to let the truth do its own work. I think about cause and effect a lot these days, not in an abstract way, in the very practical kitchen table way that comes from living long enough to watch things play out. What happened to me didn't happen because anyone was uniquely cruel. It happened because a series of small choices, made quietly over time, produced an outcome. Her choices. My choices. Robert's choices, even. Made years before any of this, sitting at a desk with a lawyer, thinking carefully about the people he loved and what they might one day need. Every action moved in a direction. Everything landed somewhere. I thought about what would have happened if I'd been different. If I'd been the kind of woman who announces her business at the dinner table, who talks about property values at Christmas, who mistakes openness for closeness, I probably would have signed something, not because I'm foolish, but because I wouldn't have had the distance to see what was being built around me, the slow architecture of it. The condo listings, the financial advisor referrals, the careful questions about my health. None of it lands if you already know what you have and you've already protected it. The whole thing depended on my not knowing my own strength. That's what I keep coming back to. Knowing your own strength. Not performing it, not announcing it, actually knowing it quietly, the way you know your own address. Robert taught me that without ever saying so directly. He was an engineer. He didn't build things carelessly, and he didn't love carelessly either. He spent years thinking about what would be fair, what would hold, what would still be standing after he was gone. That kind of care, the long, unglamorous, patient kind, is its own form of character. It doesn't look like much from the outside. It looks like paperwork. It looks like a trust document sitting in a lawyer's filing cabinet in downtown Guelph, but it was the most loving thing he ever did for me. I think integrity works that way. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's the accumulation of small, honest decisions made when no one is watching, and it either holds or it doesn't when pressure is finally applied. Robert's held. Mine held too, I think. The decision to stay quiet, to wait, to resist the pull of wanting my son to simply know that I was capable without having to prove it. And then there's the harder part, the part about not falling apart. There were mornings that first winter when I genuinely didn't know if I was reading the situation correctly or if grief had made me paranoid. There were nights I almost called my sister and talked myself out of it. Staying steady when you're unsure takes something that doesn't have a tidy name. It's somewhere between patience and backbone. And it has to come from inside because there's no one standing there handing it to you. My son is still my son. That matters to me. I don't know yet what we're rebuilding, or how long it takes, or what it looks like when it's done. But I know that I showed up to that kitchen table as myself, not diminished, not managed, not signed over. And that is the only foundation anything real can be built on. 64 years old, still getting started.